Thank you, Madam Moderator. Sehr geehrter Herr Minister Altmaier, sehr geehrter Herr Professor Töpfer, Excellencies, Nordic ambassadors, mina damer och herrar, ladies and gentlemen. I was originally coming here as an ordinary participant when I was asked, and I'm honored by it, to speak here. But now the minister ordered me to speak before him. So I have to underline that I am just a private citizen from a Nordic country. I'm not responsible for anything politically. So what I'm going to say will be reflections, provocations, but of course trying to find a positive tone. I wish I were a Norwegian oil sheik bringing good news about new discoveries of our oil and gas, but I'm not. But as far as the Nordic countries go, I am proud to, in a way, represent them here today. Is there a Nordic way? Yes, there is, if we look at the relative performance of the Nordic countries, both individually and as a group. They are among the most competitive countries in the world, ranking among the 10 best. Together they make the 10th economy in the world. Also in terms of human development, they are among the leading countries. They are among the top countries in sustainable development. Finland was number 1 in the beginning of this millennium. Should I tell you whose government we had at that time? Significantly, it was our industry and business overall that improved their act so much as to take us to the top. We are, as Grain said, together the Nordic countries, we've been in the avant-garde in liberalizing markets. Nord Pool is a great achievement, the biggest electricity exchange in the world. Functioning, we liberalized the telecoms markets, which led to fantastic development of the branch. The Nordic countries are leaders in developing sustainable and renewable energy and technology. In one ranking, Finland is number 4 in so-called climate innovation. Our governments have been spearheading efforts to reach an international climate accord. The Copenhagen Climate Change Conference was a good example of that. The 3 Nordic EU member states strongly support the development of common energy and climate policy for the European Union, and all of us work for better cooperation in these fields. Together, we, the European Union, Germany and Poland, are engaged in developing a Baltic energy network in the so-called BEMIP project, which really deserves attention. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nordic economies, with the exception maybe of Denmark, are highly energy intensive, producing metals, steel, paper, chemicals, etc. for the world market and using a lot of energy for heating. The notion of ecological footprint is misleading, in my opinion, because the consumers of our products are part of such a footprint and thus equally responsible for reducing its size. You can't separate the producer and the consumer. Our countries, particularly Iceland, Norway and Sweden, are relatively self-sufficient in energy, Finland being most dependent on energy, imported energy, some 80%. I believe Denmark too is dependent, but Finland is particularly dependent on one source for imports of energy, and that is Russia. In terms of energy mix, we can say Iceland, Norway and Sweden more or less depend on one or two major sources. Geothermal and nuclear, in this case of Sweden, thermal energy, all naturally still use a lot of oil. We have to recognize that the share of oil in our energy mix is still very big. Denmark and Sweden have daringly set the goal of 100% carbon-free energy by 2050. In Denmark, for example, the share of wind power is already 18%, whereas in Finland it's under 1%. So we are behind it. Nuclear power is a major factor in electricity production in Sweden and Finland. In my country, the share of nuclear is 32% in electricity production and 18% of total energy end use. We can take gas, it's only 10% in Finland, in spite of our neighborhood with Russia. Der Spiegel once labeled Finland as Reich der Reaktoren, badly distorting the facts. Germany was just as big a Reich. Sweden is much bigger, not to speak of France. So when in a letter to the editor I tried to correct the Der Spiegel story on these facts, they published my letter but removed the relevant sentences from my letter. It was my second government that approved a fifth nuclear power station in Finland, the first major Western nuclear power since Chernobyl. I regard Chernobyl as a criminal case in a dictatorship, so we have to treat it as such. Finnish nuclear power is both the most economical and the safest in the world, with the highest capacity utilization rate and lowest number of incidents, none of them even nearly serious. And this is because our regulator, STUK, is very tough and continuous investments are made to improve the safety of the power plants, and that has been neglected elsewhere. We only have to go to Sweden when they are behind us in this respect. So it really needs taking care, nuclear power being a challenging form of energy. And the new post-Fukushima requests for improvements are duly being met in Finland. So to put it briefly, we've got a very advanced nuclear energy culture in our country. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we fully respect the German Energiewende decision also in this respect. And I was glad to hear from the Minister of Lunch that you're not going to preach on us, that there won't be any anti-nuclear crusading, like in the name of ethics, because we think we are just as ethical as you in Germany with our nuclear power. I'd like to point out that the Greens took part in the centre-left government, the previous government, that approved 2 more nuclear power plants, and they stayed in government, although they said they were against it. So the new decision to approve these power plants it sticks. Now we see, I'd like to say, the Energiewende from two angles: challenges and opportunities. The challenge is to minimize the potential negative effects of the Energiewende, that is the build-up of renewable, particularly wind energy. There is a huge need in Germany to invest in the grid to transmit electricity from northwestern to southwestern part of the country. The loop currents going through Poland and the Czech Republic are dangerous. In order to prevent the grid from collapsing, the stability of the grid must be secured by reserve power, which inevitably at this stage should be fossil, possibly gas. The need for investment in rebuilding and expanding the European grid overall is huge, estimated even up to 1 trillion euros. However, the grid is rather declining, mainly because of the economic downturn, but also because of European policies. Our countries should make it a priority to invest in power grids, and I'm also talking about the Nordic countries, particularly Norway and Sweden. Coordination between the Nordic countries in grid utilization must be intensified while more renewable energy is being fed to the grid. This is a particular Finnish point of view. Cooperation to even consumption peaks between European countries will become more and more urgent. Why not consider cooperation with Russia, exploiting differences in time zones? When we look at maps produced by the European Union, for example, Russia is more or less excluded. I mean, you don't see, there's no connection, but there's so much connection, and there's this natural partnership between European Union and Russia that should be developed in spite of all the difficulties we have between the European Union and Russia. The price hike already happening in Germany, it's still modest. Was it 100, maybe up to euros per year per household? I'm not so familiar with the facts. Can lead through an integrating European electricity market to increasing prices in the Nordic countries too, and of course particularly to households, because we've also got something like a split structure between households and industry. So industry in Finland is trying to secure as much independence as possible from these developments. And actually, the decision for more nuclear power in Finland, one of the main arguments was more energy independence, while we are naturally also developing renewables with the same goal. So these are some of the challenges. Of course, to create the European electricity market by 2014 is a common goal, although I have some doubts whether it is achievable. Ladies and gentlemen, now to the opportunities the Energiewende offers, and they are great. Properly managed, it can be regarded as a real step towards a significantly greater use of renewable energy in Europe and, of course, setting an example to the world. The Nordic countries are very much interested in the prospects the Wende gives to develop new technologies and build up new industries around them. These include, actually, or should include, developing functioning CCS technologies and smart grids and other methods to improve the flexibility of the grids. So there are really great opportunities here, and Nordic industries are very much looking forward to exploiting these opportunities. Even though we are not going to have a similar Wende in Finland, we, as well as our brother Nordic countries, are fully committed to the common European goals in increasing the share of renewable energy, and I was glad that the moderator referred to the Finnish level of 30%. Our goal is 38%, and we're going to make it, and we will make it. The Nordic Energy Cooperation Program for 2012-16 is an interesting example of Nordic cooperation. It's based on the general goals of stability, reliability, sustainable growth, and citizens' well-being. The program covers electricity markets, renewable energy, energy efficiency, policies for sparsely populated regions, international cooperation and research. The 5-year program for research in sustainable energy will receive 54 million euros. So it's quite an investment. Ladies and gentlemen, finally some comments on global and European energy and climate policies. Europe must continue to play a leadership role in global climate negotiations towards Durban 2015. Hopefully, European politicians have learned to engage less in hype and more in getting agreement on effective accords. Hype is a general disease in the European Union. We've been setting too many goals we know that cannot be met, thereby undermining the credibility of the European Union. There is too much bureaucracy. I heard the figure of 27 interventions in recent times in the field of renewable energy. So that's also a question of better management for us, more realistic approaches. That is the global level. Our industry is very much concerned with market distortions and confusion created by European Union renewable policies. I refer to the interventions. So soon the energy market will be dominated by energy heavily supported by subventions, direct and as a result of capacity markets and very high prices. So this is certainly something we want to avoid. Reviewing these subvention systems is necessary. Subvention schemes must be harmonized, particularly those for energy use of wood. That is in our interest because it's a major factor in our energy supply. Otherwise, we'll risk losing valuable industrial raw material. Industrial use of wood gives several times more added value than burning wood. On the other hand, wood can be a major source of biofuel, both as a byproduct of industrial processes and from new production methods using waste wood. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned the BEMI plan, that is in Northern Europe around the Baltic Sea, to create a functioning electricity and gas grid. This would support energy security, bring prices down, and improve possibilities to bring renewable energy like biogas to the market. So it's an interesting development that when we develop the gas grid, you can feed in also biogas into it. With such developments towards an inclusive energy policy, we can better look forward to increased cooperation with Russia the Nord Stream pipeline, the two already as prime examples. Ladies and gentlemen, the initiative by Minister Altmaier for a club of countries interested in renewable energy is something that I believe the Nordic countries are very much ready to support and follow, and of course join any international cooperation around it. This was something that came up during the lunch. Well, I had the opportunity to mention also that there's a need for a nuclear cooperation club, but certainly we've got a big interest in having a nuclear safety club too. So there's some common ground left on that side. Ladies and gentlemen, the definition of sustainable development includes both environmental, economic and social aspects of sustainability. Germany and the Nordic countries can, as leaders in all these aspects, cooperate in showing the way towards a society in balance, a world where billions can look forward to improving their well-being without destroying its basis by making life on Earth unsustainable. Our own societies are well advanced along the road to such a future. Alles Gute and viel Glück to the Energiewende. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will you permit perhaps just one question? I started out with the rhetorical question, to what extent we can actually talk about a Nordic way. I wonder to what extent we can and ought to talk about a German way. You also quoted the Spiegel, and sometime back in a very different context, the Spiegel titled an article about Germany, Vorsprung durch Panik. The idea, of course, that German progress is often made under circumstances of common panic. In fact, the Energiewende was a decision taken quite unilaterally in a situation of great affect. And I wonder how much leeway individual countries still ought to have in energy policy, given the level of interdependence of our systems, and given particularly the very, very critical role that the German economy plays, both for Scandinavia and for Europe.
Well, the Energiewende enjoys the support of the German people, and that's decisive, of course, for any outsiders. So no matter what criticism we might have and what the circumstances were, this is the way Germany is going. And we must accept that and take the positive side, the opportunities. Of course, we need to respect each other's energy mixes and choices, and then seek common ground in market development, in increasing share of renewables, technological cooperation, and increasing European cooperation, which is really needed. I would also like to make this point to the Nordics, that how many opportunities we have missed among the Nordic countries by too little cooperation. And if we take, for example, G20, we have no seat at that table. And we are still a major player in economically and environmental energy policies. So I leave this challenge to the present Nordic politicians. Thank you.
Thank you very much.